ghost towns and abandoned bunkers often draw the attention of urban explorers and thrill seekers, but beneath their decaying walls and forgotten streets lie unsettling stories of the past. The ruins hold secrets, whispers of those who came before, and echoes of what might still linger. Tonight, I'll share 4 terrifying encounters from explorers who dared to venture into these forsaken places. Their experiences remind us that some doors are better left unopened. Sit back, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for tales of unease and dread. These are 4 chilling stories of ghost town exploration. Happening number 1, shadows beneath the surface. Bunkers always seemed like relics of a forgotten era, cold, abandoned fortresses buried beneath the earth, their secrets long sealed away. I never imagined I'd find myself exploring one. A few months ago, I stumbled across a blog post about a decommissioned military bunker in the middle of nowhere. The location wasn't hard to find with some digging online, so one Saturday, I packed my gear and drove out alone. When I arrived, the entrance was more imposing than I'd expected, a massive metal door, slightly ajar, leading into darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the only sound was the crunch of my boots on the gravel. I turned on my flashlight and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the graffiti. Walls once lined with military equipment were now covered in crude drawings and messages left by other explorers. "Turn back" was scrawled in red paint near the entrance, but I brushed it off as someone trying to spook visitors. As I ventured deeper, the bunker's layout became more labyrinthine. Long corridors stretched endlessly, with side rooms filled with rusted machinery and crumbling furniture. One room had old bunk beds stacked against the walls, their mattresses rotted away. The air grew colder the further I went, and the silence became oppressive. Then, I heard it, a faint tapping sound echoing through the halls. I stopped, holding my breath, and listened. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, and it was coming from deeper within the bunker. I called out, hoping it was another explorer, but my voice only echoed back to me. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound. The tapping led me to a large room that must have once been a control center. Rusted panels and broken monitors were scattered around, and a massive map of the area was pinned to one wall. In the center of the room stood a single metal chair, and on it, something was resting, a notebook. I approached cautiously, shining my flashlight on the pages. The writing was erratic, a mix of numbers, letters, and strange symbols. The last page read, "They're still here. Don't look at them." A sudden clang behind me made me jump. Spinning around, my flashlight illuminated the corridor I'd come from, but it was empty. The tapping resumed, closer this time. It wasn't random anymore, it had a rhythm, almost like footsteps. I backed out of the room and started heading toward the exit, my pace quickening with every step. The sound of footsteps followed me, matching my speed. When I glanced over my shoulder, my flashlight caught a fleeting glimpse of something, a figure darting into the shadows. The exit was in sight when the footsteps stopped. I turned one last time and saw it, standing at the edge of the light, a pale figure, featureless except for hollow, dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. I ran. Outside, the air felt lighter, but I didn't stop until I was back in my car, the bunker entrance a speck in my rearview mirror. I haven't been able to explain what I saw that day, but one thing is clear, some places are abandoned for a reason. Happening number 2, the forgotten fallout shelter. A few weeks ago, my cousin Ethan and I decided to explore an old fallout shelter we'd heard about through a local urban exploration group. The shelter was built during the Cold War and had been abandoned for decades. It was buried deep in the forest, far from any main roads or towns. The few photos we'd seen online showed rusted doors, crumbling walls, and an unsettlingly intact underground network of rooms. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and a sense of adventure, we set out early one morning. After a long hike, we found the entrance, a heavy steel door hanging slightly off its hinges, partially hidden by overgrown vines. The air around the opening was damp and cold, as if the bunker itself was exhaling. The first few rooms were uneventful, empty storage spaces with rotted shelves and scattered debris. Graffiti covered the walls, and the ground was littered with cans and bottles left by previous visitors. As we moved deeper, the air became heavier, carrying a faint metallic smell. We eventually stumbled upon what looked like a common area. Tables and chairs were overturned, and an old record player sat in the corner, covered in dust. On the wall was a faded sign that read, "Stay quiet, stay safe." Beneath it was a small pile of personal belongings, glasses, watches, even a few children's toys. It felt out of place, as if the people who lived here had left in a hurry but couldn't take everything with them. Then came the noise. A faint humming sound echoed through the halls, like a distant generator struggling to start. Ethan and I exchanged nervous glances, but curiosity pushed us forward. We followed the sound to a room labeled Control Center. Inside were rows of rusted monitors and an ancient control panel with buttons and dials. As Ethan examined the equipment, I noticed a small drawer beneath the console. Inside was a notebook, its pages brittle with age. The writing was erratic, filled with cryptic notes and drawings of what appeared to be humanoid figures. One page stood out. It read, "They're watching. Don't let the lights go out." The hum grew louder, and suddenly, the lights in the room flickered to life. We froze as the monitors buzzed and static filled the screens. For a brief moment, one of the screens showed a figure standing in a hallway, tall, with unnaturally long arms and a featureless face. Then the screen went dark. Panic set in. We bolted out of the room and began retracing our steps, but the layout of the bunker felt different, like the halls had shifted. The walls seemed to close in, and every corner we turned led us further into the maze. The humming followed us, growing louder and more erratic. At one point, Ethan stopped and shone his flashlight down a long corridor. At the far end, something moved. It wasn't human. It crawled on all fours, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. We ran. When we finally found the exit, we burst into the daylight, gasping for air. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that we weren't supposed to leave that place. Whatever was down there wasn't meant to be found, and it's still waiting. Happening number 3, the tunnel's echo. 3 months ago, a group of friends and I set out to explore an abandoned bunker system rumored to have been part of a secret government project. Unlike most bunkers, this one had a network of tunnels connecting various underground rooms. Locals warned us about the place, calling it the Whispering Tunnels, but we assumed it was just urban legend. The entrance was hidden at the base of a rocky hill. The heavy steel door was partially open, creaking as the wind pushed against it. As we stepped inside, the temperature dropped significantly. The first room was small, with remnants of old equipment and a collapsed ceiling in one corner. It smelled of rust and mildew. The tunnels began a few meters ahead, narrow and damp. Our flashlights barely cut through the thick darkness. As we walked, the sound of our footsteps echoed unnaturally, almost like there was someone else behind us. Every so often, we'd hear faint noises, whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. We shrugged it off, convincing ourselves it was just our imaginations amplified by the creepy setting. But as we ventured deeper, the whispers became clearer. At one point, we all froze when we distinctly heard a voice say, "Don't go further." Nervous but intrigued, we pushed forward. One of the tunnels opened into a large, circular chamber. In the center was a strange, metallic structure covered in soot and scorch marks, as if there had been a fire. Surrounding it were old crates, some labeled with faded warnings like "Do not open" and "Hazardous materials." As we examined the area, my friend Lisa found a leather-bound journal in one of the crates. The entries were dated from the 1950s and described experiments conducted in the bunker. The last entry stood out: the containment failed. We've sealed the tunnels, but it's still here. God help anyone who enters. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, overlapping and frantic. It sounded like dozens of voices speaking at once, but no one else was there. The air became stifling, and our flashlights began to flicker. Panic set in, and we decided to leave. As we retraced our steps, the tunnels felt longer and more winding, as if they were shifting. Then, we heard it, a low growl echoing from somewhere behind us. We started running. The growling turned into heavy footsteps, closing in fast. At one point, I turned around and caught a glimpse of something in the shadows, a tall figure with glowing eyes, moving unnaturally fast. We barely made it out. The moment we stepped into the open air, the noises stopped, and the oppressive feeling lifted. We never figured out what we encountered that day, but I've come to believe the warnings were real. Some places are better left undisturbed, and whatever was in those tunnels should remain buried. Happening number 4, the factory beneath the town. A year ago, my older brother Jake convinced me to check out an old bunker beneath the ruins of a factory in a ghost town we'd read about online. The town had been abandoned decades earlier, and the factory had a reputation for strange occurrences. Beneath it, there was an underground bunker, rumored to have been used for clandestine experiments during its peak operation. The entrance was hidden in the factory's basement, behind a heavy steel hatch covered in rust. It took both of us to pry it open, revealing a staircase that descended into total darkness. A cold draft hit us as we peered down, our flashlights barely illuminating the way. The bunker's walls were damp and lined with exposed pipes that groaned occasionally. The first few rooms were empty except for broken furniture and machinery. Then we came across a long hallway with doors on either side. Some were ajar, revealing small offices filled with faded paperwork and shattered equipment. In one room, Jake found a large corkboard with pinned photographs. Most of the images were of workers, but a few showed strange machines and what looked like experiments. One of the pictures was disturbing. It showed a man strapped to a chair, his face blurred out, with wires connected to his head. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "Subject lost. Proceed with caution." We decided to leave the room, but as we stepped back into the hallway, a loud metallic bang echoed from somewhere deeper in the bunker. "Probably just something falling," Jake said, though his voice wavered. We continued cautiously, eventually reaching a large chamber that appeared to be the heart of the operation. The ceiling was high, with hanging lights that flickered faintly as if they were trying to turn on. In the center was a massive machine, partially dismantled, with wires and gears scattered around. That's when we heard it, the faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind us. We turned, our flashlights scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. "Hello?" Jake called out, his voice echoing eerily. The footsteps stopped. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered to life, revealing the far corner of the room. A figure stood there, unnaturally still, its back turned to us. It wasn't human. Its arms were too long, and its head was tilted at an odd angle, as if listening. We didn't wait to see more. Grabbing Jake's arm, I pulled him back toward the hallway. As we ran, the sound of footsteps returned, faster this time, echoing down the corridors as if something was chasing us. When we reached the staircase, Jake stopped suddenly, shining his flashlight back down the hall. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I strained to listen. Beneath the sound of our ragged breathing, there was a low, guttural growl. We bolted up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut behind us. Outside, the factory seemed almost welcoming compared to the darkness below. To this day, we've never spoken about what we saw, or heard, in that bunker. All I know is that something was left behind, and it's still there, waiting. Exploring abandoned places can be a thrilling adventure, but as these stories show, it can also bring you face to face with the unknown. Whether it's whispers in the dark, figures in the shadows, or something that defies explanation, these encounters remind us of the dangers lurking in forgotten places. If you ever find yourself drawn to explore the ruins of the past, remember to tread carefully. Some secrets are better left undisturbed. Thank you for listening, and as always, stay safe and stay curious.